Hey everybody, welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith, hanging out with the legend Joe Morton. What's going on?
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. God Friended Me, your brand new show on
Yes.
CBS. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How you feeling about it?
I feel pretty good. As a matter of fact, we just got the numbers on the way up here, and we have been seen by 10.2 million people last night in our premiere, which apparently is now the hottest news show of the new season.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the show a little bit, because off camera we were talking, when people look at the name, they're going to think religious show, but it's so much more than that. It's a show really about people and how they're all kind of connected.
I mean, I think the God in the title and the idea that people will think it's religious is the way into the show. But you know what? People who believe in God, they're believing in something that's intangible. People who don't believe in God need something tangible. They need proof. They need science. This show is about belief in the human spirit and that we're all connected. That asking someone for help or needing help is not something that happens on an average day. You know, you walk down the street, how many people look like they need help, and what do? We just walk right past them.
Exactly.
So this show is about helping one another.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because the scenarios that are in that first episode, I mean, whether it's somebody on a subway platform or a taxi in the middle of the street, there are those situations that we have in our lives that we don't necessarily think about the grander scheme of things, but this show kind of puts everything into perspective that maybe people are connected in a bigger way.
I think that's true. I mean, the way that happens, right? So the guy in the subway ends up being our hero sort of at the end of the show.
Right.
The woman that he's helping, she ends up meeting someone that she's wanted to meet for most of her life, her mother. So it is that we are all connected, and I think we are living in a time where we forget those things. I mean, everything about our politics, especially these days, sort of makes everybody feel like they're all separate, that, you're right. If you're right, then I have to be wrong. Whereas this show is saying, well, no, but there's some middle ground. In the show, I play a minister. My son is an atheist. So by the end of the show, obviously at the beginning of the show, we're not getting along very well.
Right.
But by the end of the show, we at least come to a place where we agree to disagree.
And I think that would be a useful thing for today's day.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Definitely not a lot of middle ground today, that's for sure.
No, not at all. No, it's you're right. I mean, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's it. End of conversation.
So you've played a ton of roles in your career.
Yes.
What was it like preparing for this minister role?
I did a little bit of research just in terms of what it meant to be Episcopalian, which is what he is, and decided that my overall template, if you will, is Michael Curry, the guy who was the Episcopalian bishop at the royal wedding, who surprised them because he sounded more Baptist than he did Episcopalian.
That's right.
But and what's great about Episcopalian is that it is probably one of the more diverse churches in terms of who's part of that church.
Right.
So. Yeah, it'll be a different thing playing a minister as opposed to a minister of the devil, if you will, Papa Pope.
Yeah, it's quite a jump from Scandal to this role. So what was the toughest part of that transition?
Nothing really, because I deliberately was looking for something that would be diametrically opposed to Rowan. I didn't want to do that again. I think that was a very special thing that happened in my life, to play a character like that, to play a character where the woman who created him was writing me monologues per episode. So that doesn't happen on television a lot. So I thought, instead of looking for that again, let's look for something different.
And you've been a part of some really special projects, whether it's Scandal or some of the movies that you've been in. So when you think about your whole career, I mean, what are a couple of the moments that you really think about that you're proud of?
To begin with, Brother from Another Planet, John Sayles, was just one of the joys of my life, still my favorite film. Terminator 2. Working with James Cameron and Linda Hamilton was amazing. I mean, I'd never done a movie that big before. And James would do stuff like blow out windows just to see what it looked like. And I thought, wow.
And he's got the budget to do so.
Well, and I think that was the first time he must have had that budget, because the original Terminator was basically an independent film. It was a small movie. And recently doing things like Justice League was pretty terrific. And Justice League was terrific because at the same time I was doing a play. I was doing a play called Turn Me Loose, which was about Dick Gregory. And it's a very hard look at the times that he came up in, about the politics that he was involved in, about him as a comedian, et cetera, et cetera. And we did it here in New York, the West Side Theater off Broadway. And literally on a Sunday, I would leave that show, get on a plane, and fly to Great Britain. Wow. And the first time I did that, the next thing I knew, they were putting a harness on me, and I was being picked up by creatures and flown over a wall. And I thought, wow, this is the life of an actor.
It's pretty wild when you think about it like that. So you've done so much for such a long time. How have you remained consistent throughout your career and just doing all these different types of projects?
I think the one thing that probably runs through all of them is that when I first started, it was a time where a lot of African-American male actors were given parts like pimps and drug dealers and boogaboos of some sort, which I decided would not be for me. That what I wanted to do was put together a string of characters that just happened to be black, but they were whatever they were. And that's what stayed consistent, is that for the majority of my career, because of that choice, I've played good guys. So that, again, when I got to Scandal, was what I was looking for at the time. I thought, you've been playing good guys most of your career.
Right.
Let's look for a really smart bad guy. So my dream came true. And I think, but again, what's great about Rowan was that he was human. People both hated him and loved him, one because he loved his daughter so much and would spend whatever amount of energy, time, and money to protect her, and the same thing for the country that he lived in. So I don't think we'd seen a character like that before. And that, in many ways, was the kind of where I was hoping to go. And the same thing is true with the minister in God Friended Me, is that here's a guy who has a number of things I think that are eating at him. He lost his wife when his children were young, and so how did he bring them up? I mean, they ended up, his son is an atheist and his daughter is gay. So for a minister, does he look at himself and think, how did that happen? So again, more about humanity and less about other things.
And I think with all of your roles, there are people in this life that can connect to that, which is really the most important thing. So whether it's a minister or you're playing somebody that is a minister of the devil, there's certain things that people can connect with. And I think that's really important. I think also the diversity in your roles and the diversity in Hollywood as well. I know it's a big thing that you want to see a little bit more of. But when you think about how things have changed in Hollywood, what else still needs to change in order to push things forward?
With all of the talk about the diversity or the lack thereof in Hollywood, I think the only real way that changes is if people of color who have money get involved in that industry. I mean, if you want people to tell your stories, you have to be the ones that fund it. If I'm black and I want to tell a story about a young black romantic whatever, and I go to a white producer, that's going to be part of the struggle. That producer's going to think, well, do we make money doing this? And how do we make money doing this? The myth always was that there was no foreign market for so-called black film. That's all begun to change.
No doubt.
Selma changed that. 12 Years a Slave changed that. Interestingly enough, both those films had a number of black English actors in them, which helped that to change, but whatever it takes. Black Panther has now changed that. So we'll see. It's that old thing. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Or the other one I like to use is half steps to the wall. The impression is you're getting closer to the wall, but you never reach perfection.
Right.
So racism will be something that we will always have to deal with, and hopefully it'll become less and less so.
I think that's a great way to put it. So let's take it back a little bit. Grew up here in New York.
Yes. Well, no. I was born in New York.
Born in New York. I know you're military family, kind of all over the place.
Right, so didn't grow up here.
Give me some early memories of when you were in New York and just some childhood memories of being in a military family and going all over the place.
Being in a military family at the time that my father was in the Army, this is now late 40s into the late 50s, his job ended up being integrating the armed forces overseas, which meant we arrived at whatever post he was assigned to racially unannounced. And he was an officer. And the first few times that he did that, they put him in jail because they thought he was being fraudulent, that he wasn't really an officer. So at that time, integrating the Army was not an easy thing to do. And so he and us as his family went through a lot of craziness because of that. Being on an Army post meant that I was in a fight every other week or so. The odd thing was then when that was over, my father died when I was 10, and we came back to New York. Until we got settled, we actually lived on Edgecombe Avenue with my grandmother. And the surprise there was that, because I thought, oh, great, my own folks go to a school where mostly everybody there is black, that should be cool. It wasn't, because here was this little kid, I was 10 years old. I spoke 2 languages then. I spoke, 3 languages then, English, Japanese, and German.
Can you still speak them?
Japanese, the only thing I remember is a song. Mashi mashi anone, 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 mashi mashi anone, ake desu ka. That's the only thing I remember. German, I remember a few phrases, simple phrases that most people remember. But again, it made me sort of the stranger. I was that person out. So again, I was in a fight every other week because I wasn't like other black people in my neighborhood. And then, high school in Queens, college at Hofstra University, where again, I was the only black person in that school. But it helped me do certain things. It was for the first time, once I started going to acting classes, it was the first time I'd actually found something I really loved. I mean, I'd been playing guitar and started to write songs by that point, which I also truly loved. But this was the first time I realized that maybe I was an artist. And what made me feel good about that was that my father had always wanted to be an artist.
Oh, wow.
A painter, not an actor. I have a painting that he did. We had an old Zenith TV, and it had these 2 doors that were made out of bamboo that he painted. And then he put 2 Japanese scenes on one on each door. And he was really good at it, but he thought to be black and to be an artist would be economic suicide, not something that he thought he could do. So in that sense, I think maybe I accomplished something that he wanted to.
I think that's really interesting because, society tries to put people in categories and buckets, and you were somebody that was culturally diverse based on all the different places you have been, had many different interests, and you end up going on your own path. And I think that's cool that you didn't just conform to what society wanted, to what your neighborhood wanted, and I think that's benefited you as a result.
It has. I mean, to see the world and to understand the world from outside of this country,
Right.
and in all of those ramifications, because we were still on an army base, just gives you a different perspective. And even after that, I traveled to lots of different places. So I think it helps. I think a lot of our problems in this country are that we don't recognize what goes on in other countries. And we also don't have that point of view. If you go to South Africa and you watch television on South Africa about what's going on in America, it's a very different perspective, especially considering what happened there. So yes, I think it's benefited me quite well.
Yeah, I think some people just kind of go through life with blinders, and for some people, they have those blinders on, but when they lift them up and they actually see what's going on, it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, it can be traumatic.
It most certainly can. So you mentioned your musical background,
Yes.
theater background. So who were some people early on that influenced you, whether it was music or the arts or anything like that?
I guess when I was, once I decided to become an actor, I think I took on, I used to call it the school of ugly acting. So people like Dustin Hoffman, who were too short, not necessarily attractive, blah, 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 were doing leads in movies. And I thought, oh, that's what I want to learn how to do. And I think I took that on knowing that walking into an audition by that time, you were, the first thing and the only thing anybody saw was you were black. So that put you in a box. So again, what was important for me was to step outside that box, to certainly get you to look outside that box and look at me in a different way. Case in point is Leonard Nimoy was directing a movie called The Good Mother. Good Mother? Good Wife? Not Good. Good Wife is the television show.
Good Wife's television show.
Good Mother.
Let's go with The Good Mother.
And I was auditioning for the part of a lawyer. And when I walked in for the audition, he said, well, we have to be very careful about how we project our black people in this movie. He actually said that.
What year was this?
And 90s, in the 90s. So I said, well, let me just prepare the part and bring it back to you and see, what you think. And I brought it back and had all of these arguments even before I did the audition as to why I should be given the role. And then he said to me, but you're talking to me like you're a lawyer. I said, hello, that's why I'm here. And I got the part. And a lot of what I did in my early career was just that, was to get people to pull off their blinders and sort of see me just as who I am, not as just another black actor who's walked in the room.
That's a great way to put it. So let's talk about your Broadway time, because that was certainly a magical time for you. How much did that impact the rest of your career?
Well, as I've said to every young actor, if you can do the stage, if you can do theater, then you can do all the rest of it. The rest of it becomes easy. And for me, while I was in school, I didn't get cast very often for any number of different reasons. Well, you're supposed to be in love with that person. This is who your cousin is, and you're the only black person. It doesn't make sense, blah, 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 blah. So I thought, well, I'd rather leave school and get paid for that kind of insult. So what I ended up doing was, what was the question again? Now I've lost my train of thought.
Your time on Broadway.
So when I first come on Broadway, it's the first thing I end up doing on Broadway is hair, which couldn't be more accepting than anything else. And it really just taught me an awful lot. So from hair, I did an off-Broadway show called Salvation, because it was the time of Speaking of religious musicals, Jesus
Right.
Christ Superstar was big then. I did Jesus Christ Superstar on the road. And then all that culminated with doing Raisin, which is a musical version of Raisin in the Sun, on Broadway, and I played Walter Lee and got a Tony nomination for it, and what's called a Theatre World Award. And what's great about the Theatre World Award is you can only win it once. That's the only time you can win it, so I thought that was pretty cool. So, yes, I think what Broadway teaches you, what the theater teaches you, is how to use your whole body, not just your face. So that's why I always tell young actors, do theater first, because then you have all of that. You know, it's like trying to become a doctor without an internship.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good if you tried to do
good.
that. So you've worked with some great people. I saw you met President Obama.
I did.
What was that experience like?
That was fun. Everyone showed up that day pretty much wearing a dark suit and a dark tie. I showed up wearing a dark suit and a T-shirt that had a picture of Obama on it as if he were a superhero opening up his shirt, getting ready to take off. And so he came down the line after he gave his speech and, you know, shook my hand, and my girlfriend said, "So what do you think of his T-shirt?" And he looked at it and he said, "Very handsome man."
That's a great story.
So yeah, no, that was one of the highlights of my life. And you know, people always say, so if you could have a friend on Facebook, who would it be? I would love it to be the Obamas.
I think that's a good choice right there. So going back to God Friended Me, when people watch this show, what do you want them to think? What do you want them to leave feeling?
Well, one, it's a feel-good show. It comes right after 60 Minutes, which I think you need to feel good after watching 60 Minutes. And I think that the idea of helping one another, the idea that we are all connected, that we're not kind of these islands floating around in the sea of humanity on our own, that all of those things, that the mosaic of all of us together is a lot stronger than kind of this stained glass mosaic, if you will, with all the separations between us. And I think that's what hopefully people will take away, that one, we're connected, and two, that if we spend more time helping one another instead of trying to find fault with one another, we might live in a slightly better world. Who knows?
I love it. Joe Morton, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
God Friended Me, catch it on CBS on Sunday nights. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.